Christian, but they probably would not have used that terminology, at least that early. What did it mean to be a Christian, to be a follower of Jesus? And there were many people who said, well, in order to follow Jesus, in order to be what we'd call a Christian, you must first of all become a Jew. You must convert to Judaism. You must adhere to the tenets of the Jewish faith. And then you can become a Christian. This was a great controversy, and it ended up in a meeting called the Council of Jerusalem, which we find in the next chapter of Acts. The Council of Jerusalem is in the 15th chapter of the book of Acts. When Paul goes to Jerusalem, and there's a very contentious meeting there as they kind of work this all out. Because for many of them, first of all, the idea that the message was preached to the Gentiles was just strange. It was beyond their comprehension. It was only for the Jews. And when Peter and Paul began to preach to the Gentiles, and Gentiles began to believe, then it was a real question about what do we do with these people. But I think the key verse here is that where it says that an open door has been opened to the Gentiles. And it was finally decided that you did not have to become a Jew. You did not have to eat kosher, for instance, in order to follow Jesus. That was a huge decision. Made a huge difference in where the Jesus movement went from there. An open door. We're talking, and have been all year now, about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. And today we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about what does it mean to make disciples for Jesus Christ. We've been talking about ourselves, we've been talking about growing as disciples, but what does it mean when Jesus says to go into all the world and make disciples in my name? So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about that. What does it mean that we should be about the business of making disciples? Next week, we're going to talk literally about what does it mean to go out and make disciples. Jesus said go into all the world. But today, we're going to talk more about the church itself. Because when we go out and invite people, we invite them where? To come into the movement, which today is the church. And when we invite them into the church, we have to be ready to receive them. If we're going to make disciples, what does it mean for us as a church to have open doors? And that is one of, over the years, we've had many different mottos or phrases for the church. And in the United Methodist Church today, we talk about having open doors. So that's what I want to talk about today. What does it mean for us as Grace United Methodist Church to have open doors to the world? And I'm going to talk on three things. Actually, I'm going to have somebody else help me out here, but we're going to talk about it means to have an open door. It means that we are welcoming, that we are grace-filled, and that we are concerned. So we'll start by talking a little bit about what does it mean to be a welcoming congregation. If somebody who's never been here before walks into our doors, do they feel welcomed? What does a church have to do to be welcoming? Well, let me suggest that the first thing is that you have to have a physical plant that is welcoming. Now, this may seem kind of dry, and this may seem kind of unspiritual, but it's also important that in this day and age, when people come and visit us, that they find that our building is a warm, welcoming building. Now, to stress the importance of that, I'm going to tell you a little story about it. On the way down to Minneapolis on Highway 55, there's a certain restaurant that we visited several years ago. It's not in Paynesville. It's a ways down the road. It's kind of a specialty restaurant. I remember going in there the first time, many, many years ago, and when we went in there, a couple things I noticed right away is, one, it didn't smell quite right. The carpet was a little torn, and the tables were dirty. Not filthy dirty, but a little dirty. We ate there anyway. Didn't go back for many, many years. And then one time, maybe 6, 7 years after that, we were going to that same town, and I had the hankering for the same kind of food, and I thought, one night they had something, just wasn't quite right there. I'll give them a second chance. So we went back again. Guess what? Smell wasn't quite right. The carpet was torn. The tables were a little dirty. I mean, the dirty table, maybe the carpet you can't get fixed right away, but the tables I haven't been back since. The same true applies to a church building. If somebody comes in a church building and things are, just imagine, if the paint's peeling off the walls and the carpet's all kind of ragged and it leaves a bad taste. We want people to come and feel welcome here. And we've done a great job. And so I'm going to just, give yourselves a pat on the back that this church is people come into this church, they say this is just the physical plan itself is attractive. In fact, just this week, I had a meeting here one night, and a couple people from other churches in town were here, and they looked at our new library and they said, wow, that's really nice. That's really neat. You got to do stuff like that. You got to do stuff like that to keep things up and to make sure that when people come in, it's not just that the paint and the walls and stuff, but a few years ago we decided, we don't have enough signage here. We got to let people know where to go when they come in. Somebody comes into a strange building, you know what it's like. You go into a strange building, if you don't know where to park, you don't know where to go, where anything is, it just feels uncomfortable. We want people, when they come into Grace Church, into the physical plant, we want them to feel comfortable as they come in. We want to be warm and we want to be welcoming. But it goes beyond the physical appearance of the building. It also goes to the way that we, who are here already, reach out to those who are visiting. Let me give you a little quiz. It's going to have a multiple choice quiz so you can, a little easier to do. Anyway, a new person comes into our church, a visitor for the very first time, and you see them. Do you see a potential new member, B, a potential giving unit, C, a potential committee member, or D, a child of God who needs our love and our care and needs to be embraced and welcomed? I think I kind of gave that one away, didn't I? How do we treat those who come into our congregation? Now, I'll admit that when we come on Sunday morning, many of us, we haven't seen each other for a week or more, and we want to welcome each other, and sometimes it's kind of hard when somebody new comes in, because then we have to kind of shift our gears a little bit. Trust me, we don't have that many visitors here that should be a problem. When I was in Rochester, we'd have 2, 3, 4 a week. Here, maybe once a month somebody new comes in the doors. It shouldn't be that hard for us to take the time to reach out and to greet them and to welcome them. Now, how do we turn people away? You say, we don't do that. We have open doors. We don't turn anybody away. Really? Do we turn people away by our attitudes? We need to be careful about how we think of people. Are we too quick to judge people when we see them? Let me suggest this. 2 young men in their 20s walk in the door one day and come to visit us. What's our initial reaction? What's going on in our minds about who these 2 guys are? And they come and they sit and they worship with us. Do we have a preconceived idea of who they are? We learn later they're just brothers. Maybe they're not. Do we see them as human beings? Or are we too quick to judge who they might be based upon what they wear, the way they look? Do we see them as a child of God? What about our attitude towards people? Are we willing to go up and greet them warmly, welcome them? Do we turn people away by our expectations? Our expectations that they should be like us. One of the things that's hard for us to understand in our culture today is that when people come into a church, they maybe don't know all the ropes. We know the ropes. Some of you probably think, why is it it's so strange that we put things like the Lord's Prayer up on the monitor? Why in the world we put the Lord's Prayer up on the monitor? We all know the Lord's Prayer. But that's the point. We know it. But you know what? In our culture today, not everybody knows the Lord's Prayer or the Apostles' Creed or the Gloria. One of the things we need to do is to understand that when somebody comes to visit us, we need to make it as comfortable as possible for them. They're not going to know all the ropes. They're not going to always know when to stand, when to sit down. They're not going to know all those little things that we've grown up with and we understand. And it's not that we need to throw them out to make people comfortable. But we need to do everything we can to help make sure that they are comfortable. And they may not meet our expectation. They're not just like us. People come who aren't like us. And thirdly, do we turn people away by our traditions? I mentioned, what if someone comes in and they're not dressed the way we are? Well, things have changed, but years ago, it was tough to come to church if you didn't have a suit and tie on if you're a guy. Today, things are changing. think it's a good thing. We still have our traditions, and we still have the way that, we prefer things, but are we open enough to understand that when somebody new comes in, that maybe we need to be open to their lifestyle? Now, that doesn't mean that we have to be all things to all people. Paul kind of leaned on that idea. He talked about that. But there are things that are true to us and things that we do not give up. We would not give up our communion time the first of each month because some people may be visiting and not understand what we're doing. There are things that we will not give up. But we have to be open and understand what is it that, how can we be as welcoming as possible and still be true to who we are as people. And I think the bottom line is, first and foremost, is that we see each individual who comes to the doors of this church, whether they come every week or whether they're a first-time visitor, we see them as an individual person that God loves and cares for. And God is calling us to reach out to and minister to. So, the first thing is, we have open doors. Are we a welcoming church? Are we welcoming? Do we welcome the visitor, the stranger, the sojourner? The second thing is, are we a grace-filled church? Now, we call ourselves Grace United Methodist Church. Are we grace-filled? And I've last week got in a conversation after church service with Jeff about this very thing, and he shared a couple things with me, and I thought, that sounds really great. I think you should share that today. So I'm going to invite Jeff to come up, and he's going to take the second point of the sermon and talk about a grace-filled church.
Good morning. So, as Pastor Rick mentioned, we were talking a little bit after the service last Sunday. And it kind of came up because we were talking about our churches and our community and some of the changes that have gone on. There's been some pastors that have leaving. And, I made this statement to him. I said, there's only one thing that could cause me to leave our church and go somewhere else. And it was that if a new pastor came in and what they came in and did was spend all their time preaching about hell and sin and fire and brimstone. And because I said I've visited churches like that when I was trying to make a decision, and we were trying to make a decision of which church to go to. And it's not what I believe that God has placed on my heart to talk about or to be a part of, and it's not what I believe draws people to Christ and draws people to the Christian faith. So as we were talking, and after he mentioned to me that he'd like me to kind of share that with you, I spent some time thinking about why is it that I believe that? Why is it that I am so passionate about that belief? And I started thinking about Jesus, and I started thinking about what drew people to Jesus. Because, Jesus was the kind of person, and he was a person in his day that crowds flocked by him and to him. I mean, it's not just that people came to worship Jesus. There's story after story in the Bible about how tens of thousands of people walked miles to follow him, to go and hear him preach and to sit. The stories where he feeds the 10,000. People just didn't, drive down the street and, to the auditorium and get a chance to hear him speak. They had to seek him out and follow him. People went to great lengths. What is it about a man? A man, right? He was nothing more than a man. He was flesh and blood like all of us are. What is it about him that made people do that? I mean, when you think about it and you put yourself in that place, there had to be something really special about him, something really different about him. And what I came up with is story after story in the Bible that talked about how accepting and loving Jesus was. You think about the story of the prostitute who everyone was about to stone, and how Jesus interacted with that woman. He didn't come and tell her that she was going to go to hell or all the bad things that were going to happen to her if she didn't change. He just loved her and accepted her. I think about how when Jesus went into the places that no one else went to, he went and he ate and broke bread with the tax collectors and the sinners and the prostitutes and all the people that we probably wouldn't be dead being seen with. That's where he went. He went and he spent time with them, and he loved them and he accepted them. And he didn't talk. I mean, Pastor Rick and I were talking before this sermon. I said, I can't really find a place in the Bible where Jesus talks about, you do this, you're going to go to hell. He didn't really talk about that. He talked about love and acceptance and forgiveness and how to treat each other and how to love each other. Those are the stories and the examples that he gives us in the Bible to live by. And so that's why I think I feel the way I do. That those are the things in this world that draw people to Christianity and draw people to our faith. It's a really dark world sometimes. It's a really dark world. And it doesn't need us to bring more darkness to it. It needs us to bring the light of Jesus to it. And I think that's our job as a grace-filled congregation, that we need to hold up our name. And it didn't even occur to me until after I started thinking about all this that our name was Grace. If there's ever a church that should stand for the grace and the love of Jesus Christ, it's this one. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So, an open church, a church with open doors, is a church that's welcoming, a church that is filled with God's grace and not condemnation. And it's a church that's concerned for each member of that church and for anyone who walks through the doors of that church, and hopefully for those around the church as well. But today we're just talking about the church itself. Are we concerned about those who come in to our sanctuary? Concerned about their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, their spiritual health? Are we concerned about them? Do we truly want what is best for them? Physically, do they have physical needs that we have? One of the obvious ones is that we have an elevator now. You come into a church and you're on crutches or in a wheelchair and they don't have anything but steps. What does that say about their acceptance of people who have physical disabilities? That's kind of an obvious one, but there's a lot of other ways we can look at it. The mental health of individuals. Are we open to the fact that when people come here, they don't have to think just exactly like us? When they come in the doors of our church, they don't have to sign a statement saying they believe in the Apostles' Creed exactly as we preach it, but we're willing to. Anybody can come and anybody can question us. Anybody can disagree with us. We give people intellectual freedom. We understand that that's a gift that God has given to each of us. Emotionally, are we concerned about each person's emotional health? We all have our little idiosyncrasies. I'm the only one that's perfect. The rest of you all have problems. I know that. We all think that anyway, that I'm okay, but you're a little messed up. But that's not true. We're all messed up some way. We all have our issues. And when somebody comes in the church and they're a little bit different than we are and they've got some things they're struggling with, are we willing to embrace them anyway? We can't fix them necessarily. We can maybe help move them to where they need to go, but we can certainly love them in their journey. Are we open to that? To whoever they are? Are we concerned about their spiritual health? Are we concerned about helping them grow in their faith? Maybe they don't even know Jesus when they first come. Are we ready and prepared to help them in that journey? To grow in their relationship with Christ, to meet Christ and to continue that relationship? Are we willing to accept them wherever they stand at this point in their life and willing to help them move forward and be everything they can be as a disciple of Jesus Christ? Well, these are just some thoughts, and I know we're running out of time here, but as we think about, as we move into the future, as a church, as a congregation, as we think about what it means to make disciples, let's think about what that means for us as a congregation right here at Grace Church. Next week we'll talk more about what it means outside the walls of the church, but what does it mean for us right here?